I am a temple who walks the earth. My womb is fertile for giving birth. I am a woman planted in truth. I grow my branches from sacred roots. You are the form of who you want to be. So come untethered, your soul is free. We're here to heal, we're here to thrive. We are a dream who's come alive. We light a candle, our hearts awake. Illumination for God's sake. A revelation for God's sake. An evolution for God's sake. An inspiration for God's sake. 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 For God's sake.
And so it is. Hello, Essence. I'm Jody England, and you are listening to Wild Soul Medicine Radio. Welcome back. It's good to be in the energy space with you this week. And if you're like me, you may have slid into this space from a place of extreme busyness. And so I just feel like it would serve us to take a moment and ground together. So let's do that. If you're in a space where you can close your eyes, go ahead and do that. Widen your feet, allow them to actually touch the floor if they're not already. And let's go ahead and just receive a big deep breath in. And as you exhale, imagine sending your energy right down through your body, out the bottoms of your feet. And then with your next inhale, imagine that you can draw the energy up through the bottoms of your feet, allowing the energy from the earth to come right up into your body. And just allow yourself to slow down. Feel the presence of the earth. Feel your feet on it. Feel yourself in your feet. And then imagine that any of your energies that have been entangled in things other than this, right? So maybe with other relationships with your children or your partner, things going on with work, problems you've been trying to solve, go ahead and just invite your energy to untangle from what it's been engaged in and allow the energy itself to come back in, leaving everything else outside your space. Beautiful. And so from this space of presence, I'd like for you to go ahead and just do a quick scan through your body. So a scan through your energy space to just see what's present. Now that you are here, what parts of your body feel comfortable or not? And what emotions are present, if any? Just take a little check-in with yourself. Great. And then you don't really have to fix anything. You can just say hello to whatever is there. And here we are. Wonderful. So it's good to be with you. I am really looking forward to our discussion today. It's one that has really been on my mind over these last couple weeks. And I've had this conversation with several people in different groups. And so I was like, wait, why am I not doing that with you all. So so I'm bringing the conversation live. This is what is alive and present in my own energy space. It's the inquiry that I'm engaged in and my friends and I are looking into. So we're going to play with it here together today. And the topic is that really around manifesting. But, how it may show up for you is, why can't I get what I want? Why can't I get what I want? So, those of us that are familiar with the law of attraction or conscious creation, we understand the idea that, through energy, we can create our desires. And yet, for many of us, we find ourselves in routine spaces where we think we are creating something and we think we're aligned with it. And then it's like, well, why hasn't it shown up yet? It's probably one of the most regular conversations I have with people. So, we could probably spend about a year talking about all of the things that would be present underneath why you haven't yet created what you want. Many of them being subconscious and, those are pieces that we can work with another way. But what I want to begin the discussion with today is really around even the structure of manifesting, right? The structure of it, because I think this is a piece that I haven't seen talked about much at all. And it really isn't even talked about much like within The Secret or within the Law of Attraction community. There's like kind of a few pieces that we're all familiar with. And then there's this like one mystery piece that I think is actually the fuel for creating the alchemical fire that brings the whole thing to life. So we're going to talk about these three pillars today. And where these came from, it was actually in a conversation that I was having with my shaman. She was here to do a ceremony with me, and we were just kind of casually having lunch as we were preparing for the ceremony to start. And we were talking about my intention for the ceremony, right? And so what I was telling her is, one thing that I'm curious about exploring in this ceremony is this idea of will. Because, I have a very strong will, and I always have my whole life. Like when I want something, I can push for it in a way that I can generally cause it to happen, right? And yet, as the scope of my creations gets bigger and as I become more conscious, I want to be in partnership with the divine and I want to use less force. And so, I'd been in this whole lengthy exploration of essence, of course, surrendering to essence and creating from essence. And I'm in a couple of groups with women where we practice conscious creation. And what I had noticed in those groups is there were lots of women who were better than me at being in the space of detachment and essence and surrender, really coming from this feminine space of beingness, right? And yet they weren't manifesting any better than I was, right? So I'm coming at it from will, and they're coming at it from, surrender and release. And yet we're all kind of sitting there like, how come this isn't working? Like, what's happening? So this is the conversation that I was having with my shaman, and she started flowing some wisdom to me, and I grabbed a napkin and started sketching out what she was telling me. And in 15 minutes, I had this diagram, and I knew from the moment I saw it, I said, this was $1 million conversation we just had. And so I just placed this drawing beside me on my vision board right by my desk. And, and I've thought about it and I've looked at it since then. And then it surfaced again this past week where I was about to head into a meeting and I was leading the meeting, and it was really, we were needing to like move something forward. And I was reading the energy, like, what is going on here? Why is this not working? What's out of place? And I got this hit, go get that paper, right? That there's medicine in the paper. So I grabbed the paper like minutes before the meeting started. I had no idea what my plan was going to be about it. And as I started to lead the meeting, this is what came forward. So I'm just going to share with you kind of an explanation of what this drawing is, how it seems to flow together, and then we're going to do an energy exercise together so that you can start to get to the bottom of where the disconnect is in your system. And then, if there's time, which I think there will be, I'm happy to take a caller or two so that we can specifically look at how this is put together in your energy system and see if we can create some freedom for you to flow more fully into your creations. So if you know that you want to call in, you can do that anytime during the show. The number is 937-552-2747, 937-552-2747. Viv will be happy to receive you, and then when we're ready, she can put you through. Okay? So here's what happened. I go into this meeting, and I start talking about these 3 pillars of manifesting. So if you want to make a diagram for yourself, there's 3 circles, right? So the top circle is essence, right? So this is the first necessary ingredient for any creation is essence. So what does essence mean? Well, this is really the space of purity. This is where you connect in with divinity, with source, with the surrender of divine will, right? Like what's wanting to be created, what is in the highest and best good. And this is where a lot of people, so some of us like to hang out in this space because, it's beautiful to sit there and dream and to communicate with source. And yet if you only hang out up there, what will happen is nothing will ever get done down here because there's nothing actually driving the intention or the creation. So this is where a lot of people get stuck, particularly on money, because we visualize money and we meditate about money and we think about what we'll do. We daydream about what we'll do with the money, but that's all above, right? It's all out there and it's not actually down and through, right? So we do need essence though, because when we miss essence, then we get into egoic manifestations, right? And we have many of those. So an egoic manifestation is where we're like, I intend to manifest $10,000 this week because I need to pay my mortgage, right? Or I intend to enroll 12 people in this new offering because that will, let me know that I've made it. And sometimes they're even trickier where I intend to purchase this house and, you think you're not attached, but really you want the house because you'd be sad if you didn't have it or you think it means something about you. So when we manifest without that connection to purity, we come up with intentions that are not actually in alignment with truth, right? So we do need it, and it's not the only thing we need. All right. So if you're following along, top box or the top circle really is essence. Okay. And then if you're drawing this, there's going to be 3 total circles. And then between them, there's going to be those arrows that denote a cycle, right? Because these are always all moving back and forth. So there's arrows on each end of the connection between the circles. And by the way, if you don't want to draw this, there's a beautiful copy of it in the tribe. If you're not a member of the tribe, facebook.com/groups/Wild Soul Medicine Radio Tribe, right? Wild Soul Medicine Radio Tribe on facebook.com/groups. That might be easier than me trying to explain how to draw it. So on to the second circle. So the second circle is will, right? This is the place where I was like, wait, I know there's got to be some benefit to me having the ability to push with my will in such a way, and yet I can't figure out how to place it in this process. So here's where to place it. It actually has an equal place alongside essence, right? So they need to be matched. What will does is it drives intention in the 3D world. Will drives intention in the 3D world. All right. So if you dream something up while you're in essence and in your meditation with source, then how that actually comes into being down here in the 3D world is through will, right? So your will says, yes, this, right? There's a push behind it. There's an embodiment of it, right? There is a desire to make it so. That's what will is, a desire to make it so. Right. And so, will is beautiful. That's where power comes from. That's where it's kind of like starting the engine on the car, So like you can sit in the beautiful car and dream about what it would be like to drive it to the beach. But if you never turn the key, it's like turning the key is will. That's the place where you engage with the creation, right? Now, the out of balance piece of will is when it's not married to essence, So many times I have had an overabundance of will where I found myself trying to force something. Like, I'm going to get this done no matter what. If I work hard enough, if I strive more, if I pay more money, then I can get this result that I'm wanting. And so if you only have will, but it's not actually married to essence, then, you just find yourself getting worn out and working yourself to death, right? It's sort of like banging your head up against the door and the door is locked, right? You can never get in if you're just going through emotion. So you really do have to have both of those elements. All right. Now, those two elements are in a certain way not that revolutionary. I feel like in a lot of ways, those pieces are kind of talked about. And, I think early on in my manifesting education, right, I had an overabundance of either of them, right? So initially it was lots of will and lots of forcing and lots of striving. And then, there was a period where I went through lots of essence. And so I didn't make a lot of money and I didn't do a lot of stuff, but I meditated like crazy and I saw a lot of things and I felt really good and peaceful, but I really wasn't actually living my purpose. I wasn't doing anything in the world, So now that I'm here and I feel like I have this marriage between these two, it's like, great, okay, so will, essence. And I'm constantly like balancing the two and which one needs more. And yet here I was with these things not still manifesting, right? So now we come to secret mystery ingredient number 3, right? So the third box, what goes in there? Attention and focus. Attention and focus. That is the missing ingredient. All right. So write that in your circle, attention and focus. This is the thing that wraps its arms around the birth from the essence and the turning on the ignition key from the will. And then the attention and focus wraps its arms around the creation and holds the container. So it's kind of like if you're starting a fire and you dream up the idea that I'd like to have a fire. And then through will, you go gather some sticks and some leaves and a lighter. And then you start the flame, right? So you could stop there and be like, well, I lit the flame and, so I'm going to go, mow the grass now. And, hopefully the fire will start if Source is watching, like Source will have that fire going. And then we leave it and we come back later and take a look at it and it's like, wait, there's only smoke happening here or there's nothing happening here. It completely burned out. And we're like, what happened? What happened is we didn't give it our attention and focus. And so attention and focus is like watching the words and the energy around this thing that you're creating. It's noticing if there are unconscious blocks that are surfacing. It's paying attention to the alchemistic ingredients of essence and will, and did one start to overtake the other, and do we need to move that back into balance, right? So it's like us sitting there with that fledgling little fire and gently blowing on the root of it, and then adding some, dry little kindling so that we watch that catch, and then we feed in the next little stick, right? So that is how we coax our creations into being. And what's super interesting is when I presented this model to this group that I'm part of, I thought attention and focus was only my issue, right? Because I'm aware that I've started many projects, and because I tend to have so many going at once, often, I would say mostly, not even often, most of the time, I start them and then I don't pay attention to them very much at all. Maybe other than to like judge them that they're not really manifesting as quickly or as completely as I want them to. So when I presented it to the group, I did so in a way of like, hey, let's all take a look at which of these three tends to, be your strong suit and which one tends to be the one that you're challenged with. And so out of this entire group of women, every single one unanimously, after doing this energy exercise, came up with attention and focus. That's the place where I'm challenged. And so I became curious. Like, I wonder what it is that would have us divert our attention and focus from these beautiful creations that we have. Why would we do that? Why don't we just stay focused and blow on our creation until it's a beautiful, sustainable, glowing fire? And so that is where I noticed a fair amount of wounding. And we all seem to have some wounding around it. This is the place where it plays out. And all of our wounding is a little different, right? So an example would be, I looked into my own stories. Like, what stories do I have around attention and focus? So one of them I noticed as I looked in was, I have a story that I only have so much attention and focus. And so, if I was to give more of it or all of it to a particular thing, I might run out, right? I might run out. And you may resonate with that, right? That might be one of the pieces of your wounding as well. What actually ends up happening is I have that story, so I give nothing my full attention and focus. And so, I run out of it anyway, right? Because I'm starting so many things that I'm not actually seeing any of them to fruition. Another piece of my story revolved around being afraid of the power of my attention and focus, because I remember a time when my attention and focus could open a portal to another dimension. When I was very little, I used to do that. And I'm a little scared of that, right? Because there were repercussions to doing that in this 3D reality. And so I kind of have this subconscious belief that I have this like Superman X-ray vision, and if I focused it on something, I might blow it up, right? Or burn it up, because I don't exactly know how to moderate my full focus and vision. So it's a little scary to me, right? And so there's so many ways this story might be playing out for you, and that's what we're going to take a look at. And why I want to have you take a look is because the first step to shifting anything is becoming aware of it, right? So instead of having your creations and then walking around complaining that they haven't shown up, but secretly being unconsciously committed to not having them show up, this is the doorway to that. This is where you get to discover, why would I block my creation? What am I afraid of, right? And if you'll notice, this is happening everywhere in your life. Like there's almost nothing that you could be participating in that wouldn't blossom if you gave it more focus and attention, right? And I think it's actually a chronic issue with us women, because it's sort of the shadow of multitasking, right? Like we can hold a lot of different things, which is beautiful. And when we're out of balance, we can hold a lot of things as a way to go unconscious, right? So we're actually just kind of flittering above all of the busyness and the stuff and not really deepening in or being with any of the parts of what we're calling in, right? So let's do a little exploration together. And when you're ready, just close your eyes and let's receive a breath together. Okay? Just feel yourself arriving in the center of your head again, if you shifted from where you were before. And then let's begin with, I'd like you to imagine a particular thing that you've been calling in, right? So if it's money, or if it's a class or a home or a partner or any of those things, just go ahead and choose one. Choose one for now. And so I'd like you to imagine that you could take a look at that thing, as if it arrived, the thing that you've been dreaming about, and maybe even taking action toward, right? Or having some will about anyway. Go ahead and notice if that thing showed up right in front of you in your mind's eye. And so you're like in one space and it's across the room from you. And so let's just imagine that we can push play on this movie and see what is it that would happen on the way from you being across the room from it to actually getting to it, right? So just kind of have the movie go in slow motion and notice what happens, right? So here you are, you start to cross the room. And then just notice, right? So are you paying attention to it? Are you attuned to it? Or do you look distracted? Are you going the opposite direction? And no judgment, right? So there's no judgment. We're just being curious about why we're doing what we're doing and how it's put together. The secret is we already know you're doing it because you haven't manifested the thing, right? So there's something in the way. So we can just get on board with that and then take a look at what's underneath that. So continue to move forward or play the movie forward anyway, and notice what else can you see about what is it that has you divert your attention and focus. So another way you could try this on if you're having a hard time visualizing it is just feel into your body, right? So if I said to you, your assignment this week is to meditate each day for 30 minutes or to take, direct inspired action for 30 minutes each day in order to have this thing manifest, right? I want you to just feel in your body where a contraction happens when I say that. Great. And so now imagine that you can take a look inside that space where the contraction is. And if you knew what the story was behind the contraction, what is it? What scares you about that? And don't worry if it doesn't make sense. Go ahead and even just speak it out loud where you are or write it down. You can make sense of it later. And what else? What else is scary about that? Yeah, so I just felt for some of you, there can also be a story around, well, if I gave my attention and focus and then I didn't get the thing, that would be really disappointing, right? And so it's better to sit in this possibility of like, I'm going to do that, or I hope it's going to happen, knowing you haven't really put all of your eggs in the basket, rather than putting all your eggs in the basket and facing the possibility that maybe it doesn't happen. And then where would you be, right? So it's like avoiding disappointment, being afraid of your own power, being afraid of failure. Those could be additional reasons why you avoid attention and focus. Let's see if there's anything else that might be happening here. So just feel in for yourself. Is there anything else for you to know about your relationship with attention and focus? This is a tricky one. So for some people, a lack of attention and focus is really a smokescreen for being addicted to trying, addicted to worrying, addicted to not having, right? Those are all unconscious setups that we give to ourselves. And so we're actually more attached to the experience of wringing our hands than actually receiving the thing, right? So we use this feeling of confusion, like, I don't know why I'm not getting this thing. I don't know what else I could possibly do. We live in that space so that we can keep worrying and fretting rather than actually turning and facing like what it would feel like to actually have this thing reach you, you know? Which is related to feeling not good enough. That's another piece. So do you see how there's so many elements that can play into this just one circle on the cycle, right? But it's a big one. It's a big one, focus and attention. And I liken it to, it's almost like, it's like giving your love, you know, someone mentioned to me this idea of work as worship. So I think a lot of us as women have created a story related to attention and focus that it feels like work, right? Because we've been taught how to do it in a really masculine way, which is from a headspace. So we have to think about it. We have to literally focus our mind on it. And that also is a disconnect because as women, we're not designed to focus in that way. And so it does actually drain us in a way to try to focus like that. So I'd like to give you a demonstration or an experience of what it's like to use your attention and focus in a more feminine way. All right. So let's play with that now. So imagine that you can, now we're going to think of, so clear your screen, clear from your space, whatever you were thinking about before. Okay. And I want you to bring in a new thing. So this is a new creation that you desire. Go ahead and decide what that is. And I would say, you know, maybe medium level creation. So something that you could imagine happening, but isn't like winning the lottery. You know, we don't want to create too many blocks to the experience right off the bat. All right. So imagine that you can just have that thing out in front of you, right? So the idea of it, the image of it. And as we try on this idea of attention and focus, I'd like you to see if you could, first of all, let's try it on from the headspace. So when I first tell you attention and focus, just imagine, like, at least this is the way I always held attention and focus, almost like I would squint my eyes and I would really like put a lot of energy through the center of my forehead and I'd be thinking, right? So my brain is on high activity. I'm thinking. What do I need to do? How does it work? What's happening now? Where is this going? Right? So just try that on for yourself. I want you to have the experience of attention and focus from the headspace. Yeah. And, you know, for most of us, there might be a comfort level in that because we have created some things like that before. All right. So now I want you to imagine that you can lower the attention and focus. So what it's going to do now is it's going to drop down from your head into your heart space. What if it was possible to have your attention and focus on something by loving it from your heart space? All right, so go ahead and try that. The hint here is you won't be able to process it. So what may happen is you start to feel love and then you start thinking like, what, am I loving? Am I doing it? Am I holding it? Is it blah, blah, blah? Right? So you're going to just drop into the experience and I'm going to stop talking. You're going to drop into the experience of like, what if your heart could open and you could focus on this thing almost as if you worshiped it, right? So it's this feeling of love. Loving the thing. All right, so just try that I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to have the experience of attention and focus from the heart space. Another hint is if you're watching yourself have the experience of loving it with your heart space, you're still in the head, right? So it's really a feeling. It's only a feeling. So see if you can drop out of tracking it from the eyes or the head and strictly go with that feeling from the heart to the thing. Good. So, congratulate yourself if you were able to have any experience of that. Pat yourself on the back. It may have only been a fleeting second. You might not have been able to hold it the whole time, and that is so fine. We're just waking up to this idea of embodying, right? Embodying our attention and focus in this new paradigm, feminine way. All right? And I really think that that is one of the missing ingredients from this whole traditional manifesting paradigm, where it's like, think about the thing you want and then imagine, that you're doing blah, 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 because all of that is still headspace, right? So then they would say, like, imagine you're having the experience of, but it's still from a masculine headspace. So what we're doing now is, like, there aren't even any words for the feeling, but for me, when I finally dropped out of my head into the heart, it's like my chest shot forward. Right? It's almost like involuntarily opened and shifted forward into this feeling of, there you are. Ha ha. Right? And so that's the piece to play with in your meditations is, can I love this thing into existence? What if I was like making love to it as it's birthing into solidness, So it's like from essence, the directive comes forward and there's the dance with the divine of like, oh yes, create this. And then the will turns the key on it and says, okay, I will take these actions around it. And one of the actions might be, I will set time and space for this sort of focus and attention play. Right? And then as you're practicing the focus and attention, it's like heart space. All right? And so then there's one more level. There's one more level to drop into. And before I drop into this, I just want to remind you, when I complete this, I'm going to take a caller. So if you'd like to play with me taking a look at your energy system to see where your attention and focus story is, you can call us at 937-552-2747. 937-552-2747. Okay. So if you'd close your eyes again, I want you to now imagine that you can start dropping from your heart space even lower into your womb space, right? So the womb space is where we embody creation as women. So I want you to imagine that here's this manifestation idea out in front of you. And as you drop into your womb, again, letting go of the processing of the head and just experiencing, what if the womb could reach out and have a creation experience with this thing you're calling it. So just feel that. Let it surprise you. Yeah, isn't that wild? So for some of us, it can be super hard to even wake anything up in the womb space. And if that happened for you, no worries. It's just going to take a little more practice. For me, when I land in there, sometimes it feels super pleasurable. So it's a little bit like a sexual experience, but not quite, right? Like having this feeling of focus and attention on creating something from that space. So it's like a turned on feeling, but it's more of an aliveness in that space. That's kind of how we associate those sorts of sensations. And today when I felt it just now, it was more like a full feeling, like I felt pregnant with the creation, And so notice how when we transition to this more feminine feeling of attention and focus, it actually becomes something we would want to do. It's no longer a thing we have to check a box on or another thing to add to our already masculine list of linear items that need our attention and focus. But instead, it's a sensual, beautiful experience that we can have inside our energy space that makes our creations effortless. Yes. So, and I just want to, I do believe we have a caller who's ready to come on. And before I do that, I want to just share some of the miracles that can occur when you start addressing this idea of just paying a little attention and focus to your creations, right? So when I started just having the inquiry around where else could I bring attention and focus to the things I'm creating, I didn't even set like a specific, like goal. I didn't have anything in mind about how and where or what I would even put it on, but I just started I made the commitment that I'm going to continue paying attention to when I try to go unconscious or to avoid giving my full attention to something. And so just even having that in the general space of my energy, what started happening is these things that I'd been avoiding and tap dancing and, tiptoeing around started getting handled. So there was like a medical bill from when my daughter broke her arm and we were self-paying and like I needed to dispute the bill and we were kind of phone tagging and it had been going on a couple months and, it was like a $700 bill and I didn't want to deal with it. And so it was about to go to collections because I like just didn't want to call them back and fight about it, but I also didn't want to pay it. And so in the middle of this inquiry, somewhere in the next day or so, I get a call from them. I happen to be available. We have a conversation that lasted 10 minutes and they wrote off like $450 of the bill and I paid the rest on the spot. Done, right? Attention and focus handled. Rather than so much time I had spent worrying about it and avoiding it and building a case in my mind of what I would say and how I'd handle it and blah, 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 right? Then I settled into like, okay, great, let me look at the rest of my bills. And so I sat down and spent, a couple hours actually reviewing all of the charges in my business checking account and handling some items that had been outstanding and actually paying myself a paycheck, which I hadn't done in a while. And it was funny because it was actually pleasurable and I felt so good after having done it. And so it was a huge energy shift in my system. And again, it was just by having a commitment that I'm going to start looking at my attention and focus. That was it. And so, essentially I found several $1,000s worth of money by paying attention. And while I was not paying attention, I was more focused on like, why isn't more money coming in? And yet I already had money in there. I just wasn't looking at it. Do you see what I mean? So, and then, again, with like so many other areas where even just a little attention and focus, makes a huge, huge difference on what you allow to come in. Actually, I have a client where we've been playing with this too. And as we started shifting her attention and focus, we just checked in yesterday and she's like, manifested entry into the college of her choice and she's, received a new relationship. And that was like all in a week where suddenly she just started like landing down and in with those beautiful like heart and belly spaces open to the creation. And then it could just find her, like it magnetized right to her. So let's play a little bit. We have a caller who's ready, so let's go ahead and lean in and see what we can discover. Hi, this is Jody. You're on the air. Who am I speaking with?
This is Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl. How are you?
Well, I'm excited to be on this call because I feel like I'm stuck in another area. I talked with you a while ago, and it's weird because I have your radio show on, and it must be like behind.
There is a short, I think it's only like a 10-second lag or something, but yes, there is.
So I need to make sure I turn that down. Sorry about that. I turned
problem.
It down.
Thank you.
I wasn't distracted. But yeah, I worked with you a while back on this sort of weight I had on my shoulders, this sort of guilt I was carrying around. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that. Welcome back.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was really good, and lots of changes after that, and fun transformations, and then now I'm stuck again.
Wonderful.
So,
good. So let's talk. Where are you stuck?
Well, I'm loving this idea of the three essence, will, and attention and focus, because I think that's it. It's like I have this essence and this will, and then but now all of a sudden I can feel like I think what I've done is committed to some things that I need to now uncommit to and move on. and it's like scaring me, and so now I'm not doing anything. I'm just tired, and I want to take a nap, and which I think is okay, because I think sometimes great creative things happen when we nap. But I also just am feeling like now it's like stuck.
Mm-hmm. Yes, beautiful. I was looking at the energy as you were speaking about it, and on the one hand, I appreciate the nap idea, and for you, it looks like the nap is a way to go unconscious. What I see is the problem with the attention and focus for you is there is a commitment to helping everyone else out instead of yourself. So it's like if you were to give attention and focus to your own thing, that you would think that was really selfish. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And so so I actually see there's a bridge here because you're very good at giving attention and focus to other people. You know what that feels like, right? Where you're just completely tunnel visioned in on what they need and what needs to happen. Like you're a really good nurturer in that way. And
and I think that's what's happened recently is like my daughter became engaged, and I'm really, really excited about this whole process. But I see what's happening is I feel like this thing with the energy is like I only have so much. So if I'm putting all my attention and energy into, this process and fun experience with her, then I don't have anything left to do the other things that which I know is completely ridiculous in my head.
Yeah, it sure feels that way though, doesn't it? Yeah, it feels real.
It feels really real.
Yeah. So,
and actually, I say I'm going to reverse what I just said because it isn't. It's in my heart that it doesn't. It feels fine. It feels like it in my heart. It'll be fine. It's my head that's telling me that it's too much. So it's the opposite of what I said. Does that make sense?
Yeah, say it again.
Okay, so I think
Wait, hold on one second. The reason I got distracted is an email just came in from my shaman who presented this model. So, like she saw the message about the thing and was just like messaging me about the show. So it was super fun because she's tuned in energetically like that.
I love it.
I do too. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. So the heart and the head. Tell me again.
Yeah. So initially what I said was that it makes sense in my head that there's enough space there's enough energy for everything. But it's actually the opposite.
Right.
Because my heart knows there is enough space for it. My head because my head is like the male thing.
It is. And actually, as I look at your energy space, there is almost zero energy happening from your womb around your creations, right? There's maybe 20% of heart activation on your creations. And then 80% is in your mind and your brain and your seeing. Like that's how you're holding everybody is with the thinking. That's why it's exhausting. Because we're not actually wired for the bandwidth to have so much happening in that space. It's just not how we do it.
What's been interesting lately is I'm resistant to red and orange.
Imagine that.
That just popped into my head as you were speaking. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah, for those who don't know, so red and orange are the colors of the lower chakras, right? Which is where she has zero energy. So it all pertains. Why don't we do a little, let's see if we can do a little shifting here so that we can find another way for you to start letting some energy for your creations come from lower and see what that would shift. Cool?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. And so those of you listening, I'm sure this pretty much applies to everyone. So you can do this energy exercise right along with Cheryl and I. Okay. So I'd like you to imagine that there is a channel that goes right down the center of your body. There actually is one, right? So let's imagine that it starts right in the center of your head. And then it's like a tube that goes all the way down through your body, through the center of your body. Okay. And what we're going to imagine is that this tube is currently blocked. It's blocked right above your throat is what it looks like to me. So it like keeps all of the energy up in the head and it doesn't let anything flow down through the body. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So let's play with, I'm almost imagining it being like a clogged drain pipe, like if you needed to put some Drano down a drain pipe, but we're going to use like organic, enzymatic, holistic something. All right. So let's imagine that you could step into the center of your head and find the top of this drain. And let me know when you see it.
Okay.
All right. And I want you to imagine that in your pack, you happen to have this golden bottle of, cleaner that will start to open up this bottleneck that's happening at the top. And we're just going to do it slowly, right? Because it might be scary to just like whoosh the energy down and through. So we're just going to open a little bit.
Okay.
All right, great. And then maybe just a little bit more. There you go. Good. All right, so with it just a little bit open like that, let's imagine that you can step out of the way and allow some of this creative energy that's in your headspace to begin to find its way down through the tube, right? Just a little bit begins trickling down. Good. And notice how the head's trying to pull it back. Do you feel that?
Yeah, it's almost like I'm mad at you for asking me to do that.
I know. That's the ego, right? He's like, who the hell does she think she is?
Yeah, it's like, seriously, why am I mad at you?
Totally.
I asked you to help me.
Totally. I can handle it, right? So let's let the ego know. Because the ego lives up here in the head, right? So let's let the ego know that it will still have a job. We're not trying to take anything away from it. We're going to actually put it on a job that's a lot more productive than the one it's been on. All right? See if your mind can get on board with that.
Okay, re-say what you just said.
Yeah, beautiful, right? So there's a little unconsciousness. So if you're having that listening, that's another one of those attention and focus blocks, right? Oh, I just went unconscious. I can't even focus on that. What's happening in my meditation this morning, time and time again. I was like, who can save me from my lack of a focus and attention? Okay, so what I said is your mind will always have a job. It's mad because it thinks, well, if all of the energy goes away from me, then what will I do up here? Right? And so what we'll do is we'll give the mind a different job. So rather than it trying to focus on nurturing, which is not actually what the mind does, we're going to let the heart nurture, and then we're going to let the mind actually think. Does that make sense to the mind?
Yeah, because I think one of my fears is that, I won't have enough, well, I've said that. I won't have enough energy to do it all, but that's because I'm not in my head for the right reasons and in my femininity for the right reasons.
Yeah, so it's not really do I have enough energy for it. It's like the mind isn't built for it. So how can you nurture your daughter's wedding by thinking about it? It's not actually what energy's up there, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was I was trying to say earlier on. As soon as I said it, it was like, no, that's not even where I want to be with this whole thing. I want to be in my womb space, my nurturing space.
Totally. Won't that be a beautiful way to birth a magical wedding for your baby girl, right?
Exactly.
Of course. And then your mind can be used for things like figuring up the bills and, understanding what the budget is, right? Those are things the mind can do. But these other things will be happening lower. Make sense? And really, when we have, if you listen to the show last week, really when we have these energetic channels more awake, the information will begin to flow from them up to the mind, right? It'll be the belly saying, this is what I'm creating. And oh, mind, take care of that, can you? Right? But for now, we're just going to see, can we even let energy come down here so you can wake up to what it would be like to create from there? Make sense?
Yeah. And what I can see is some of the things that have been happening in my life over the last couple of weeks. I've shut this channel off because I didn't want to deal with the emotions surrounding old wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I closed it down. It was, feeling more flowing a few weeks ago, and over the last 2 weeks, it's like I put the plug in.
Yeah, and I think you may be onto something there, and I think also we revert to habit, right? So when the shit hits the fan, right, and we start to get busy or stressed, we revert to our fear method of coping, which tends to be head. Right. So, yeah, you probably got a little more stressed, and then it was like, oh, let's deal with that up here. And then it becomes this vicious cycle of why can't I get out of here? Because you forget, that was all so unconscious, you don't even know that happened, right? So back to letting some energy down, right? So there was all of that processing, which was so great in the head. And now let's just see if you could have the experience of, so let's tell the mind, we're going to let some energy out of here so that you can think more clearly. And the energy that doesn't belong up here, we're going to put where it belongs, right? And then allow the opening to come just a little wider so you can feel the energy begin to release that belongs elsewhere. Going right down the tube. There you go. And as it reaches your heart space, imagine that energy can fill the entire heart space, right? All the way to the back and the front and the sides. Feel that space start to heat up. You may notice your shoulders coming back, your chest moving forward. Good. And then notice the mind wanting to process that. Go ahead and just drop out of the mind and feel as if your daughter standing there happier than you've ever seen her on her wedding day is right out in front of you. And just feel your heart loving her, loving this creation into reality. There you go. Good. Good. So we'll just pause here for a brief process for people listening. How does that feel? What do you notice in your body?
Emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Feels really good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Does it feel like effort?
Well, there's part of me that resists the emotion, but there's a part of me a bigger part of me that loves it because, I've been more into my feminine body over the last year, and I've started to feel the reconnection to that and the awesomeness of that. And, there's still this feeling of unsafety that comes in and puts me back that put me back in my head so much. And then that created all this fear. But yeah, being back and opening that back up. Yeah, because it's been I've been so restless and yet so exhausted. And I knew it was that I needed to get grounded and reconnected to all my chakras. I just
and let me just pause you for a second, because the more you talk, the more it's head, right? So I just want to reflect to you what I heard you say was it actually feels really good and it doesn't feel like effort. But what does feel like effort is resisting it and starting to make it go up to the head again, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So from this space of heart, it's almost like that's where you tap into the infinite capacity to breathe love and life into your creations, this is where it lives. All right. So I want to play with the womb space, even though we're at the top of the hour. We'll go just a couple more minutes. So I'd like you to go ahead and drop back down into your heart space, letting go of the mind, letting go of the processing. Heart space, daughter out front. Good. And then just imagine that the tube can continue to open as you allow the energy to flow just by force of gravity, flowing down through your third chakra and arriving down in your womb space. Allow that energy to fill up your womb space with this creative energy. Right? It's almost like you can tap into all those desires that you had for her as a fetus inside of you, right? And then as she, was born, like the little girl that you looked at and watched grow, just feel the womb remembering. And then allow the womb to reach out in its way of focusing and giving attention to this creation of your beautiful daughter's happy wedding day. Notice what that feels like. Stay with it. Drop back down in. There you go. Good. And so that's a newer space for you. What do you notice as you tune into the feeling of that space? Give me the feeling rather than the thoughts about it.
I'm scared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what does fear feel like in your belly?
I'm just uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead and place a hand right on your belly, if you would. Maybe 2 hands even. Right? Just let your belly register safety. Right? So here you are sitting in this chair, in this space. You've got your own 2 hands on your own belly. Right? And this is just an energy. What if it was safe to allow energy and sensation to exist in this space? Just for a second. You can always turn it back off. Would you be willing to let yourself have just a little bit of sensation in this space? Right, so the mind is like, well, that's very far away from me. I don't know. Right.
Yep.
So we're just going to give the mind a pat and say, remember, mind, your job is thinking. Thinking has nothing to do with what happens here in my uterus, right? So we're going to come back to the mind and hear all its amazing thoughts. And for right now, we just want to let the uterus feel how a uterus feels, right? Allow the womb walls to wake up. There you go. Good. Yeah, so I'm just going to pause you. You've had a couple experiences of sensation there. Have you been aware of those as they've happened? They're small, but they're happening.
Yeah, but I'm resistant, I think.
Yeah, so
Feels like
so the mind is wanting to have a report about how it's winning. And there was a moment I felt, there were actually a couple moments in your uterus. One, when we first arrived there, I felt like a really pleasurable sensation begin, and then like a running away. And then another time I felt like a warmth start to happen. And then I felt you kind of back up and out. And then another time I felt like sort of almost an involuntary movement in there, kind of like being pregnant, where you're like, ooh, something's happening, but I don't know what that is, you know? So that's what it's like to wake up your womb space, right? So for you, the practice, and by the way, this is probably for many of us because we avoid our womb space quite a bit as women. So your practice is to play with what would it be like to start to allow energy to happen in that space. So you've got the heart space a lot more open. You can play with that. And then you're allowing energy to happen in the womb space. And as you get better and better at that, you're going to start to be able to sustain sensation in that space, right? And that's when you can have the same experience of like reaching out to your creations from your womb, right? So for me, when I experienced the womb space, it felt very involuntary. Like I didn't know what my womb was going to create, and I was kind of just following it. You know what I mean? Very different from the head where you're in control and you're deciding and then, you know, you're directing. The womb is a lot more out of control space. It's a lot more wild, you know? So just so you know, like those are things to play with and have an experience with so you can decide, right? Well, not even decide, like you can play with, because the mind's always going to decide like, nah, I don't think we need that. So yeah, what are your brief reflections about that?
Well, I understand what you're saying. Is that I think what would help me if I get back into dancing, it will help me be more into that womb space.
Absolutely. Dancing is a beautiful way to embody energy in the lower parts of our bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah, really any kind of movement, like even being on your hands and knees or, you know, sitting on the floor, moving your hips like in a figure eight or side to side. Those are all ways to start waking up that space. Yeah. So let's just finish with returning to your mind because we promised it we would, right? And checking to see, like we did release some of the energy that was stuck up there. So just thank your mind for playing and let it notice, you know, that it's a little more clear in here. So there's still some smokiness, right? There's more energy that could be released down, but letting it just kind of register like, oh yeah, I still have a job, even though I let go of some of the energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't feel so tired, actually.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Beautiful. So thank you for bringing your medicine to share with us on this call. I think it served many women. So thanks for coming to play with us again.
Thank you, Jody.
You're welcome. Bye, love.
Bye.
Okay. What fun. So I'd love to hear your comments and reactions about this process, this experience, this model of manifesting. We will definitely be continuing this conversation in the tribe over the days and weeks ahead. If you're not yet in there, facebook.com/groups/Wild Soul Medicine Radio Tribe. It's free. And we'll be connecting there, you know, again in the days ahead. So we will look forward to being, actually, we won't be together next week. So as we finish today, I am taking next week off in the spirit of giving attention and focus to my daughter, who is showing her horse at the fair. So I will be on vacation, and all of the archives and replays of Wild Soul Medicine Radio you can find at wildsoulmedicine.com, and you can listen to them anytime. So you're welcome to catch up on an episode you may have missed next week. And then I will be back with you again on Wednesday, August the 20th at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. So until then, my loves, happy focus and attention, and we shall talk again soon. Bye, everyone.
We light a candle, our hearts awake. Illumination, for God's sake. A revelation, for God's sake. An inspiration, for God's sake. Illumination, for God's sake. For God's sake. For God's sake.